Life can change in an instant, especially for those who spend their days caring for others without expecting anything in return. For one dedicated nurse who could barely make ends meet, a simple question from a patient's father would transform her world in ways she never imagined. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The monitors in room 417 beeped erratically, their shrill tones cutting through the sterile hospital air. 3-year-old Sophie Reyes lay trembling on the bed, her tiny body convulsing as another seizure took hold. The fluorescent lights seemed to intensify the chaos as medical staff rushed around, voices rising with urgency. "We need to administer the medication now," Dr. Chen called out, reaching for the syringe. "1 minute," Maya Thompson said quietly but firmly. The nurse, still wearing her ID badge from her morning shift at the clinic, stepped forward with a certainty that momentarily silenced the room. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, evidence of the 3 jobs she juggled while finishing her nursing degree. "Just give me 1 minute with her," she repeated, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. The doctor hesitated, then nodded, stepping back slightly but keeping the medication ready. Maya moved to Sophie's bedside, gently gathering the small, shaking child into her arms. The little girl's dark curls were damp with sweat, her eyes unfocused as the seizure continued its assault. "I've got you, sweetheart," Maya whispered, cradling Sophie against her scrubs. Then, in a voice barely audible above the beeping monitors, she began to sing, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." The simple melody floated through the room, somehow cutting through the clinical chaos more effectively than any shouted order. Maya rocked Sophie gently, continuing the lullaby as if they were the only 2 people in the world. Gradually, miraculously, the child's trembling began to subside. Her breathing, which had been rapid and shallow, started to even out. The violent jerking of her limbs gentled into occasional twitches, then stillness. "You make me happy when skies are gray," Maya continued, her fingers lightly stroking Sophie's back. Behind the privacy curtain that partially enclosed the room, Adam Reyes stood frozen, one hand pressed against his mouth. The CEO had rushed from an important meeting when the hospital called, his expensive suit jacket now crumpled in his grip. But it wasn't the seizure that had rendered him speechless. It was the lullaby. That song, his late wife's favorite, the one she'd had sung to Sophie every night before bed. The melody he hadn't been able to bring himself to sing since her passing. Adam watched as the nurse continued to hold his daughter, her gentle voice soothing away the storm that had overtaken Sophie's small body. Something shifted in his chest, a pain so familiar he'd stopped noticing it, suddenly moving, changing shape. The monitors returned to a steady rhythm as Sophie relaxed completely in Maya's arms, her breathing deep and even. The crisis had passed, but Adam remained motionless behind the curtain, unable to step forward, unable to look away. Adam Reyes remained frozen behind the curtain, his breath caught in his throat. The lullaby, the same one his late wife had sung countless times, now flowed from Maya Thompson's lips with a gentleness that made his chest ache. He couldn't bring himself to step forward and break whatever magic was happening between the nurse and his daughter. Sophie's tiny hand curled around Maya's finger as the seizure subsided. For months, his little girl had retreated into silence, her world shrinking to the confines of hospital rooms and medical procedures. Yet here was this woman, somehow reaching past all the barriers his daughter had built. When Maya finally rose from Sophie's bedside, Adam slipped away unnoticed. Later that afternoon, he found himself in conversation with Dr. Patel in the hallway, deliberately steering the topic toward the nurse who had calmed his daughter. "Maya? She's been with pediatrics for about 3 months now," the doctor explained. "Quiet, incredibly reliable. One of those people who does extraordinary things without drawing attention to herself." Adam nodded, absorbing this information while pretending casual interest. "She seems good with Sophie. She has a way with the difficult cases," Dr. Patel continued, "though between us, I worry about her. Word is she's working 2 other jobs while finishing her nursing degree. Barely sleeps from what I hear. This detail lingered with Adam as he returned to Sophie's room. He watched Maya from a new perspective as she checked his daughter's vitals with practiced efficiency. Her movements were precise, but never mechanical. Each touch conveyed care, each smile genuine despite the fatigue evident in the shadows beneath her eyes. Over the next few days, Adam began noticing the subtle shifts in Sophie's behavior when Maya entered the room. His daughter's eyes would track the nurse's movements, her tiny body relaxing visibly at the sound of her voice. For a child who had withdrawn so completely after her mother's death, this tentative reaching out felt monumental. "Your daughter likes routines," Maya explained one evening as she adjusted Sophie's blanket. "Most children do, especially after trauma. They find safety in knowing what comes next." Adam watched his daughter's eyelids grow heavy as Maya hummed softly. "You've made a difference," he said quietly. "I haven't seen her this at ease since—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Maya nodded in understanding. As she left the room, Adam realized something had shifted for him too. In the sterile, clinical environment that had become their world, Maya's presence had introduced something essential. Not hope exactly, but perhaps the possibility of it. For the first time in months, the future didn't feel quite so empty. The morning routine in room 417 had become a sacred ritual. Adam Reyes arrived at precisely 7:15 each day, laptop and paperwork tucked under one arm, a small duffel bag containing Sophie's favorite blanket in the other. The nurses had long stopped offering him coffee. They knew he brought his own in a steel thermos that kept it warm until 9. Since losing his wife 8 months ago, Adam had constructed his life around these predictable patterns. The bookstore chain he'd built over 15 years now ran largely without him, managed by a team he barely spoke to except through terse emails sent during Sophie's afternoon naps. His world had narrowed to hospital corridors, doctor consultations, and the soft beeping of monitors that measured his daughter's fragile health. Sophie, once a chattering toddler who named every stuffed animal in her collection, hadn't spoken a word since the funeral. The doctors called it selective mutism, a response to trauma. The 3-year-old now communicated through small gestures, a finger pointed at what she wanted, a headshake for no. Occasionally, a rare smile that Adam treasured like gold. "She needs consistency," the child psychologist had explained. "Routine creates safety when everything else feels uncertain." So Adam gave her exactly that. The same schedule each day, the same foods, the same dim lighting that seemed to calm her nervous system. Even the smallest deviation could trigger hours of silent tears, or worse, one of the seizures that had begun shortly after her mother's death. He watched now as Maya Thompson adjusted Sophie's blanket, her movements deliberate and gentle. Unlike other staff who rushed through their tasks, Maya seemed to exist in a different tempo, unhurried yet efficient. Speaking softly to Sophie, as though the child's silence was simply another language to be respected rather than a problem to be fixed. "There we go," she murmured, smoothing Sophie's hair back from her forehead. "Just right." Something in Adam's chest loosened slightly as he observed them. It wasn't love. He couldn't even contemplate such a thing now. But it was something equally vital. A tiny flicker of possibility that perhaps their world wasn't permanently frozen in grief. Maya caught his eye briefly as she checked the IV line, offering a small professional nod before returning her attention to Sophie. In that fleeting moment of connection, Adam recognized what had been missing in the sterile hospital routine they'd established. Simple human warmth, offered without expectation or pity. It felt like taking a full breath after months of shallow ones. The rain pelted down in sheets as Maya Thompson trudged toward the hospital entrance, her body aching from her overnight shift at the convenience store. 3 hours of sleep was all she'd managed before this morning shift. Her worn sneakers splashed through puddles, each step a reminder of how much further she needed to go before her nursing degree would finally be complete. Lost in thought about Sophie's medication schedule, Maya didn't notice the silver sedan speeding through the intersection until it was almost too late. The vehicle clipped her hip as she jumped back, sending her tumbling onto the wet pavement. Her coffee splashed across the sidewalk, mingling with the rainwater in murky swirls. "Are you okay?" a passerby called out, but Maya waved them off with a forced smile. "I'm fine," she insisted, though her knee throbbed where it had connected with the concrete. A jagged tear in her scrubs revealed an angry red scrape. Gathering her dignity, along with her soaked bag, the nurse limped the remaining distance to the hospital, her mind already shifting to her patients rather than her own discomfort. By the time she reached room 417, Maya had tucked away her pain behind a professional smile. Little Sophie sat curled in her bed, refusing breakfast, her tiny face turned toward the window, where raindrops raced down the glass. "Good morning, sunshine," Maya whispered, easing herself carefully onto the edge of the bed. "Not hungry today?" Sophie's eyes flickered to her briefly before returning to the window. "How about we make a game of it?" Maya suggested, arranging the food into a smiling face. She winced as she stretched across the bed to retrieve the stuffed rabbit that had fallen to the floor. The movement sent a sharp pain through her injured knee, but she kept her expression neutral. For the next 20 minutes, she coaxed Sophie through breakfast with gentle encouragement and silly voices for the stuffed animals. Each movement was a small agony, but the child's needs came first. When Sophie finally took a few bites, Maya counted it as victory enough. From the doorway, Adam Reyes watched silently. He'd arrived early, coffee in hand, only to pause at the threshold. The CEO observed how Maya favored her right leg, noticed the torn scrubs and the way she subtly adjusted her position to minimize pain. Yet she focused entirely on his daughter, her discomfort secondary to Sophie's care. He stepped back into the hallway, unnoticed. Something tightened in his chest, not quite gratitude, not quite admiration, but a recognition of quiet strength that reminded him of what he'd lost and what, perhaps, still remained in the world. Maya Thompson dragged herself to her locker at the end of her 12-hour shift, her knee throbbing with each step. The morning's collision with that speeding car had left her with more than just a ruined coffee and stained scrubs. She'd managed to hide her limp from most of her colleagues, but the pain had grown steadily worse throughout the day. When she opened her locker, a small paper bag sat atop her folded sweater. Maya frowned, certain it hadn't been there this morning. She glanced around the empty staff room before reaching for it. Inside, she found exactly what her injured knee needed: medical-grade pain relief gel, a box of premium medicated plasters, and a compression wrap still in its packaging. A small note was folded at the bottom. "Take care. Someone is watching." The nurse stared at the items, her tired mind racing. Who had noticed her injury? Who would care enough to leave these things? The handwriting offered no clues. Neat, measured strokes that could belong to anyone. "Everything okay?" asked a passing colleague. Maya quickly tucked the note into her pocket. "Yes, fine," she replied, forcing a smile. On the bus ride home, she kept touching the bag in her lap, as if to confirm it was real. The gesture felt strangely intimate, not just that someone had noticed her pain, but that they'd known exactly what would help without making her ask or explain. In her small apartment, Maya applied the gel to her swollen knee, wincing at the initial sting before feeling blessed relief spread through the joint. She wrapped it carefully with the compression bandage, following the instructions with the precision she used for her patients. Settling onto her worn couch with a cup of tea, she studied the anonymous note again. "Someone is watching." The phrase should have felt unsettling, but instead, it wrapped around her like a warm blanket. In a life where she often felt invisible, just another healthcare worker moving through crowded hallways, someone had actually seen her. Maya thought of little Sophie, how the child's eyes followed her movements around the hospital room. Of Adam Reyes, Sophie's father, whose gaze she sometimes felt when he thought she wasn't aware. She placed the note on her nightstand before climbing into bed, her knee finally comfortable. As exhaustion pulled her toward sleep, Maya reflected that sometimes the smallest kindnesses were like finding water after weeks of drought, not grand or dramatic, but life-sustaining in ways that made everything else possible. The soft glow of the nightlight cast shadows across room 417 as Adam Reyes sat beside his daughter's bed. Sophie's chest rose and fell in the gentle rhythm of sleep, her small fingers curled around her favorite stuffed animal. Adam brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, remembering how Maya Thompson had calmed her earlier with nothing but a lullaby. "You are my sunshine," he whispered, testing the words on his lips. They felt foreign to him now, though his late wife had sung them countless times. The nurse had somehow known exactly what Sophie needed, what they both needed in that moment of crisis. Adam recalled Maya's quiet determination as she limped through her shift, the pain evident in her eyes despite her attempts to hide it. He hadn't planned to leave the care package in her locker. The gesture had been spontaneous, born from a simple desire to ease her suffering. Not for recognition or gratitude, but because she had shown his daughter kindness when kindness was what they needed most. The CEO shifted in the uncomfortable hospital chair, his thoughts drifting to the note he'd scribbled. Someone is watching, not in a threatening way, but as reassurance that her efforts hadn't gone unnoticed. In his world of business meetings and bottom lines, Adam had forgotten the power of small gestures until he'd witnessed Maya's effect on Sophie. Later that night, in his empty house, sleep eluded him. Adam stared at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. The bookstore chain could run without him for another day. Sophie needed him more. And perhaps, he admitted to himself, he needed these quiet moments in the hospital room, where Maya's presence lingered even after her shift ended. There was something about the nurse that resonated with him. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. They were both carrying burdens silently, moving through life with practiced smiles that rarely reached their eyes. Adam turned onto his side, wondering if Maya had used the pain relief gel, if she'd wrapped her injured knee with the compression bandage he'd included, if she'd understood that the anonymous package meant someone saw her, really saw her, beyond her uniform and quiet efficiency. He didn't expect their paths to cross beyond Sophie's care. Yet something had shifted between them, a connection forged through unspoken understanding and gestures that asked for nothing in return. Adam closed his eyes, finally drifting towards sleep with the realization that kindness, once given, creates its own quiet echo. Sometimes healing begins not with grand declarations, but with bandages left anonymously in a locker and lullabies sung in barely audible whispers. Maya Thompson's heart pounded as she was summoned to the administrative office. The sterile hallway seemed longer than usual as she made her way past room 417, where little Sophie was sleeping peacefully. "There are missing lab results for the Reyes child," the hospital administrator said coldly, sliding a folder across the desk. "The blood work ordered yesterday never reached the lab." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible. I personally handed those samples to the lab technician at 3:15. "There's no record of it," the administrator replied. "And with a case as sensitive as Sophie's, this is a serious breach of protocol." Maya's mind raced through yesterday's events. She remembered drawing Sophie's blood, labeling the vials, and walking them directly to the lab. She even recalled the technician's face as he took the samples from her. "I followed every procedure," she insisted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I've never misplaced a sample in 5 years of nursing." The administrator's expression remained unmoved. "Until we sort this out, you're placed on temporary suspension. Please surrender your badge." The weight of those words hit Maya like a physical blow. Suspension meant no pay. No pay meant she couldn't cover rent, utilities, or her student loans. With trembling fingers, she unclipped her badge and placed it on the desk. Back at her small apartment, Maya sat at her kitchen table with a notepad, calculating figures that refused to add up. Her savings would cover barely 2 weeks of expenses. She could pick up extra shifts at her weekend job, but it wouldn't be enough. The uncertainty pressed down on her like a physical weight. Meanwhile, Adam Reyes was sitting in his office at Reyes & Co. headquarters when he overheard 2 employees discussing Maya's suspension. The CEO immediately straightened in his chair. "What did you say about Sophie's nurse?" he asked, startling the pair. After hearing the situation, Adam made several calls. He knew Maya's careful attention to detail with his daughter. The nurse who sang lullabies and noticed when Sophie's breathing changed couldn't possibly be negligent with something so important. Using his influence as both a major donor to the hospital and Sophie's father, Adam requested access to security footage from the previous day. He spent hours reviewing the recordings until he found what he needed: clear evidence of Maya handing the samples to a lab technician who had carelessly left them in the wrong processing bin. As Maya stared at her dwindling bank balance, her phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. The investigation had been expedited. New evidence had emerged. They needed her to come in tomorrow morning. She closed her eyes, exhausted by the weight of uncertainty, unaware that Adam was working tirelessly to clear her name. Maya's phone buzzed at 6 in the morning. The hospital administrator's voice sounded different, apologetic even. "We need you to come in as soon as possible. The matter has been resolved." Arriving at the administrative office an hour later, Maya Thompson found herself facing not 1, but 3 administrators. The head of nursing explained that security footage clearly showed Maya properly handing off Sophie's lab samples to the lab technician. There had been a processing error downstream, nothing to do with her actions. "You're fully reinstated, effective immediately," the administrator said, sliding her badge across the desk. "With our sincere apologies." Maya's relief was tempered by confusion. "How did you find the footage so quickly?" The administrators exchanged glances before one answered. "Mr. Reyes personally requested access to review the security recordings. He found the timestamp that proved your account." Walking back to the pediatric wing, Maya felt a complex mixture of gratitude and unease. Why would Adam go to such lengths for her? She was just one of many nurses who cared for his daughter. When she entered room 417, Sophie's face lit up. The little girl stretched out her arms, a silent but unmistakable welcome. Maya rushed to her bedside, fighting back tears as she embraced the child. "She missed you," Adam said quietly from the corner chair. "We both did." Maya busied herself checking Sophie's vitals, unsure how to respond. "Thank you for what you did. You didn't have to." Adam closed his book and set it aside. "Actually, I did. Someone needed to speak up for you." "But why?" Maya asked, finally meeting his gaze. "Because you've been speaking for Sophie when she couldn't," he answered simply, "and because what happened wasn't right." The CEO shifted uncomfortably in his chair, unaccustomed to explaining himself. "I know what it's like when no one believes you." Maya nodded, understanding flowing between them. For a moment, they weren't nurse and parent, but 2 people recognizing something in each other. A shared understanding of what it meant to stand alone. Sophie tugged at Maya's scrubs, breaking the moment. The nurse smiled down at her patient, noticing how the little girl seemed more animated than before. "I should get back to work," Maya said, straightening Sophie's blanket. "I have rounds to catch up on." Adam nodded. "We'll be here." As Maya left the room, she felt something had shifted. Not just her job status, but something more fundamental. For the first time in years, someone had seen her invisible struggle and stepped forward without being asked. Maya Thompson stood in front of her open locker, the metal door cool against her fingertips. The hospital corridor behind her hummed with activity. But here, in this small space, she found a moment of quiet. She pulled out a small notebook and scribbled a note to herself. Maybe not everyone sees me as a shadow. The words stared back at her, unfamiliar, yet comforting. For years, Maya had moved through life like a ghost, present but unseen, helpful but unacknowledged. Working 3 jobs while finishing her nursing degree had left little room for being noticed, for mattering to anyone beyond her professional capacity. But Adam had changed that. The bookstore CEO had stepped forward when no one else would, reviewing security footage and clearing her name. He hadn't needed to do that. He could have simply requested another nurse for Sophie, someone without complications or suspicion hanging over them. Instead, he had fought for her. Maya closed her eyes, remembering the relief that had washed over her when she'd been vindicated. It wasn't just about keeping her job, though God knew she needed the income. It was about being believed, being defended. She tucked the notebook away and gathered her things. The weight in her chest felt different now, lighter somehow. Not entirely gone, the burden of her sister's death and her financial struggles remained, but shifted as if someone else had volunteered to carry a corner of it. "You okay?" A fellow nurse poked her head around the locker room door. "Yeah," Maya replied, surprised to find she meant it. "I'm good." As she walked toward the pediatric wing for her next shift, Maya considered how Adam's quiet intervention had affected her. He hadn't made a show of helping her. There had been no grand gesture, no public declaration, just a man who believed she deserved fairness and acted accordingly. The door to room 417 was partially open when she arrived. Inside, Sophie sat on her bed, small fingers tracing patterns on her blanket. The child looked up as Maya entered, her eyes brightening with recognition. "Hello there," Maya said softly, setting down her supplies. "Ready for our afternoon check?" Sophie nodded, reaching out one hand toward her. This, too, was new. This silent trust, this wordless connection. Before, the little girl had been withdrawn, responding only when necessary. Now she sought Maya out, welcomed her presence. Not every defense has to be loud to matter, Maya thought. Sometimes the quietest gestures say the most. As she checked Sophie's vitals, Maya felt the truth settling into her bones. She was no longer invisible. Her presence in Sophie and Adam's lives had become unmistakable, necessary even. And for the first time in years, Maya allowed herself to believe that might be a good thing. The pediatric wing buzzed with anticipation as colorful posters announcing the annual fundraising gala appeared on every wall. Maya Thompson walked past them each day, barely glancing at the elegant script, promising a night of stars for our little warriors. In the break room, conversations had shifted from patient updates to excited chatter about dresses, dates, and dancing. "You're coming this year, right?" Nurse Chen asked, holding up her phone to show Maya a sparkly dress she'd ordered online. "Everyone goes. It's the one night we get to feel glamorous instead of smelling like antiseptic." Maya forced a smile while organizing medication for her afternoon rounds. "I'm trying to pick up an extra shift that night," she lied, avoiding her colleague's disappointed look. The truth was far more mundane. She simply couldn't afford it. Between her hospital job, weekend shifts at a coffee shop, and evening tutoring sessions to help pay for her nursing degree, Maya's bank account remained perpetually near empty. The gala's $100 ticket price alone would eat up half her grocery budget for the month. And then there was the matter of a dress, something she hadn't needed or purchased since her sister's funeral 4 years ago. During her afternoon rounds, Maya paused outside Sophie's room, watching the little girl nap peacefully. The child had been seizure-free for 3 days now, a small victory. Through the glass, she spotted Adam Reyes sitting in the corner chair, his laptop open, but his eyes fixed on his daughter. Maya entered quietly, checking Sophie's vitals with practiced efficiency. "Another good day," she whispered. Adam nodded, closing his computer. The doctors mentioned the gala. Apparently, it funds most of the pediatric wing's special programs. "It's a wonderful event," Maya replied automatically, adjusting Sophie's blanket. "The children really benefit from it." "Will you be there?" he asked, his question casual, but his eyes attentive. Maya busied herself with the monitors. "It's not really my scene," she said lightly. "I prefer the quiet rooms to ballrooms." Later, alone in the staff locker room, Maya found herself staring at a gala flyer someone had taped inside her locker. Probably Chen's well-meaning attempt at persuasion. She quickly closed the metal door, silencing the invitation. That night in her small apartment, Maya calculated her expenses for the month ahead while eating microwaved leftovers. The gala's ticket price, plus a dress, shoes, and transportation, would cost more than 2 weeks' worth of groceries. She sighed, crossing it off her mental calendar. Some worlds weren't meant for people like her, worlds of chandeliers, champagne, and carefree celebration. Her place was here, in the spaces between, the quiet rooms where children like Sophie needed her steady hands and gentle voice. That would have to be enough. The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor had dimmed for evening rounds when Maya Thompson finished charting her last patient. Her shoulders ached from 12 straight hours of bending over beds, checking IVs, and soothing worried parents. All she wanted was to catch the 9:45 bus home, heat up yesterday's pasta, and collapse into bed before starting it all over again tomorrow. As she pushed through the staff room door, Maya nearly collided with a tall figure leaning against the wall. Adam Reyes straightened immediately, clutching a long rectangular box wrapped in simple brown paper. Their eyes met, and he cleared his throat. "I wasn't sure I'd catch you," he said, his voice soft in the quiet hallway. "Your colleague mentioned you were finishing late." Maya tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, suddenly conscious of her wrinkled scrubs and the coffee stain on her sleeve. "Is Sophie okay?" she asked, her mind immediately jumping to her young patient. "She's fine. My mother's sitting with her." Adam shifted his weight, looking down at the package in his hands. "I heard you weren't planning to attend the gala tomorrow night." Maya's cheeks warmed. The truth was she couldn't afford a proper dress, and the thought of mingling with doctors and hospital benefactors in something from her closet made her stomach twist. "I'm not really a gala person," she said, attempting a smile. Adam extended the box toward her. "I thought maybe this might change your mind." Maya hesitated before accepting it, the weight substantial in her hands. "What is this?" "Open it later," he said, his eyes holding a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "It's a dress. Nothing extravagant, just, I thought the color might suit you." Maya stared at the package, speechless. "It's sapphire," he continued, filling the silence. "Simple, elegant. The kind of dress that doesn't try too hard, but still belongs." Their fingers brushed as she adjusted her grip on the box, and neither pulled away immediately. Adam took a deep breath. "Will you be my first date?" "In a long time," he added, the words coming out in a rush. "I haven't asked anyone since—" He didn't need to finish. Maya knew exactly how long it had been since Sophie's mother had passed away. "Adam, you don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "Just think about it." Maya nodded, clutching the box to her chest as if it might shield her from the emotions swirling inside. The CEO of Reyes & Co. had just asked her, a nurse working 3 jobs to make ends meet, to be his date, and he bought her a dress. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice barely audible. As Adam walked away, Maya stood frozen, the weight of the box in her arms nothing compared to the weight of what it represented. Maya Thompson's hands trembled as she carried the long box into her modest apartment. The evening shadows stretched across her small living room as she set it carefully on the coffee table, almost afraid to open it. After a long shift at the hospital, her apartment felt especially quiet, the silence broken only by distant traffic and the soft hum of her refrigerator. She untied the brown paper wrapping with careful fingers, lifting the lid to reveal layers of tissue paper. As she pulled them back, a gasp escaped her lips. The dress was sapphire blue, elegant in its simplicity. No excessive beading or frills. Just clean lines and beautiful fabric that caught the light when she lifted it from the box. "It's perfect," she whispered to no one, running her fingers along the smooth material. The nurse had never owned anything so beautiful, had never even dreamed of it. Maya slipped into the bathroom and tried on the gown, surprised at how perfectly it fit her frame. The mirror reflected someone she barely recognized, not the exhausted woman who juggled multiple jobs, but someone graceful and poised. The blue complemented her skin tone in a way that made her eyes seem brighter. When she returned to the box to fold the tissue paper, she noticed a small envelope she'd missed before. Inside was a handwritten card in Adam's neat script. She never got the chance to wear it. "I thought maybe now is the right time for it to live." The words hit her like a physical blow. Maya sank onto her sofa, the beautiful fabric pooling around her legs. This wasn't just any dress. It had belonged to Adam's late wife, a woman she'd never met, but whose absence shaped Sophie's silence and Adam's grief. "Oh," she breathed, suddenly feeling like an intruder. The weight of the gesture settled on her shoulders. Was she merely a substitute, a convenient body to give life to a dress meant for someone else? Or was this Adam's way of moving forward, of letting go? Maya caught her reflection again in the small mirror hanging on her wall. The woman staring back looked beautiful, but uncertain, caught between worlds, her own simple life and the more complex one that Adam and Sophie inhabited. She ran her hands over the fabric once more, feeling both honored and burdened. This dress carried memories and possibilities she hadn't asked for, hadn't prepared for. Tomorrow at the gala, she would be wearing more than just beautiful fabric. She would be stepping into a story already in progress, unsure of her role or her place in Adam's world. Maya Thompson stepped into the hospital gala, the sapphire fabric of her borrowed dress catching the light. The transformation was startling, even to herself. Gone was the tired nurse with practical shoes and a messy ponytail. In her place stood someone elegant, someone who might belong among crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes. "Maya, is that you?" Dr. Patel approached, eyebrows raised in pleasant surprise. "You look absolutely lovely tonight." The nurse managed a smile, smoothing her hands nervously over the gown. "Thank you. It's different." As she moved through the crowd, other compliments followed. Staff members who barely acknowledged her during shifts now paused to chat. The hospital administrator himself commented on her remarkable transformation. Each interaction felt like stepping onto unfamiliar ground, as though she were playing a character in someone else's story. Adam appeared at her side, handsome in his tailored suit. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, his eyes reflecting something deeper than mere appreciation. "Sophie would have loved to see you tonight." Before Maya could respond, a waiter offered champagne, and Adam was pulled away by a board member eager to discuss donation strategies. Left alone, she drifted toward a quiet corner near the dessert table, sipping her drink and watching the crowd. "That's her, the nurse from pediatrics," came a whisper from nearby. Maya froze, pretending to examine the elaborate cake display. "In Caroline's dress? I recognize it from photos." The second voice was lower, tinged with disapproval. "Adam kept everything of hers, you know. Wouldn't part with a single item after she died. Until now, apparently." The first voice again. "Must be special to get Caroline's things. Or maybe he just needed someone to fill the empty space beside him. A stand-in. Poor thing probably doesn't even realize." The words sliced through Maya with surgical precision. Her fingers tightened around the delicate stem of her glass as the room suddenly felt too warm, too bright. Every fear she'd harbored, of not belonging, of being merely convenient, crystallized into certainty. She glanced across the room, where Adam stood, laughing politely at something the board member had said. Was that all she was? A temporary replacement, chosen because she fit a dress and could fill an empty space at a charity function? Maya set her barely-touched champagne on a passing tray. The beautiful gown that had made her feel special now felt like a costume, one that revealed her as an imposter rather than transforming her into someone who belonged. Without drawing attention, she began moving toward the exit. The evening's magic had shattered, leaving behind only the sharp edges of reality. She didn't belong here. Perhaps she never would. Maya slipped away from the gala, before the dessert trays even made their rounds. The weight of whispered judgments followed her out the door, heavier than the sapphire fabric brushing against her ankles. She caught a bus rather than splurge on a taxi, ignoring the curious glances from other passengers at her formal attire. Back in her apartment, Maya Thompson stood before the full-length mirror propped against her bedroom wall, a thrift store find with a hairline crack running diagonally across one corner. The woman staring back at her seemed like a stranger. The gown transformed her, its deep blue fabric catching what little light her bedside lamp offered. For a moment, she allowed herself to admire how the dress hugged her frame, how it made her feel both powerful and delicate. "Who are you trying to fool?" she whispered to her reflection, the magic of the evening dissolving with each word. "This isn't yours. This isn't you." The nurse ran her fingers along the intricate stitching, remembering the whispers she'd overheard. "Did you see? That's Eliza's dress, the one she never got to wear." Another voice, lower. "Poor thing probably thinks she's special. Adam's just looking for a replacement." Maya's eyes welled with tears as she slowly unzipped the gown. "You weren't chosen because you're you," she told her reflection, voice breaking. "You were chosen because you fit a space someone else left behind." The dress pooled at her feet like spilled ink. She stepped away, suddenly feeling naked and vulnerable, despite wearing her simple cotton slip. With methodical care that belied her inner turmoil, Maya folded the sapphire gown along its seams, smoothing each crease with trembling fingers. She retrieved an old shoebox from her closet and gently laid the dress inside, then slid it under her bed where it would remain hidden from view, out of sight, but certainly not out of mind. Sitting on the edge of her mattress, Maya hugged herself tightly. She'd allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that she could belong in Adam's world, not as a nurse caring for his daughter, but as someone who mattered for herself. The bookstore owner had seemed so genuine when he'd given her the dress, but now she wondered if she'd simply been convenient, a body to fill fabric meant for someone else. Maya wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Tomorrow, she would request a reassignment at the hospital. Tomorrow, she would rebuild the careful walls she'd allowed to crumble. But tonight, she would permit herself this moment of grief for something that had never truly been hers to lose. Maya Thompson arrived at the hospital earlier than necessary the next morning. With determined steps, she made her way to the nursing supervisor's office and quietly requested a reassignment to a different wing. When asked why, she mumbled something about professional development and expanding her experience. The supervisor, though puzzled, agreed to move her to the general pediatrics floor, away from the intensive care unit where Sophie stayed. Back at the nurse's station, her phone buzzed with another message from Adam. She had already received 3 since leaving the gala. This one simply asked if she was all right. Maya stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the keyboard before typing a brief, "Thank you for the dress. I'll return it soon." She left his other messages unread, unable to face whatever explanations or kindness they might contain. For the next 3 days, Maya buried herself in work. She volunteered for extra shifts, meticulously updated patient charts, and spent her breaks reorganizing the supply closet rather than risking a chance encounter with Adam in the cafeteria. The routine felt safe, counting medications, checking vitals, recording data. Numbers and procedures didn't leave room for disappointment. At night, in her apartment, Maya would find herself reaching for her phone, wanting to check on Sophie. Had she slept well? Was she eating? Had there been any more seizures? But each time, the whispered conversations from the gala would flood back. That's his wife's dress. She's just filling a void. Poor thing doesn't even realize she's a stand-in. On the fourth day, Maya passed Sophie's room during a supply run. She paused just long enough to glimpse the little girl through the half-open door, sitting quietly with a coloring book. The child looked up, as if sensing her presence, but Maya ducked away before their eyes could meet. That night, lying awake in her bed, Maya confronted the real reason behind her retreat. It wasn't just the humiliation of the gala. Deeper memories surfaced: her sister's face, the accident, the funeral where Maya stood apart from everyone else, carrying the weight of guilt alone. She had learned then that loving people meant eventually losing them, and that her love specifically could bring harm. "It's better this way," she whispered to her ceiling, "for all of us." But even as she said it, Maya knew she was lying to herself. She missed Sophie's silent trust and Adam's quiet strength. Yet the fear remained stronger than the longing. Fear that she was merely a replacement, and worse, fear that she might once again bring pain to those she cared about. The hospital corridors seemed longer than usual as Maya Thompson rushed back to the pediatric wing. She had just clocked out after a 12-hour shift when her phone buzzed with the emergency alert. Sophie was in crisis. Maya's scrubs clung to her body, still damp with sweat from her shift. As she sprinted past the nurse's station, the familiar beeping of monitors grew louder as she approached room 417. But this time the sound was frantic, urgent, a cacophony of medical alarm. When she burst through the door, the scene before her made her heart drop. 3 nurses surrounded Sophie's small bed while a doctor barked orders. The little girl's body convulsed violently, her tiny limbs jerking against the restraints they'd placed to prevent her from hurting herself. The seizure was worse than any Maya had witnessed before. Adam stood pressed against the wall, his face ashen and eyes wide with terror. The normally composed CEO looked utterly broken, one hand covering his mouth as if physically holding back a scream. When he spotted Maya, relief flooded his features momentarily before panic reclaimed them. "We've administered the anticonvulsant, but she's not responding," the attending physician explained, his voice tense. "We're preparing to intubate if this continues." Maya glanced at the monitors. Sophie's oxygen levels were dropping. Without thinking about protocol or permission, she moved toward the bed. "Let me try something," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos. The doctor hesitated, then nodded curtly. Quickly, Maya gently pushed past the other staff and carefully gathered Sophie into her arms, mindful of the IV lines. The child's body continued to jerk, but Maya held her securely against her chest. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine," she began singing, her voice breaking on the first notes. Tears streamed down her face as she rocked Sophie gently. "You make me happy when skies are gray." The room fell silent except for Maya's trembling voice and the beeping monitors. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, Sophie's convulsions began to subside. By the third repetition of the chorus, the little girl's body had relaxed completely, her breathing evening out as the seizure released its grip. Adam approached the bed cautiously, his own cheeks wet with tears. He placed one hand on his daughter's head and the other on Maya's shoulder, forming a triangle of connection that seemed to radiate something profound and unspoken. The medical crisis had passed, but as Maya and Adam's eyes met over Sophie's now peaceful form, both knew that something else entirely had just begun, something neither was prepared to face but could no longer avoid. The monitors had finally quieted, and Sophie's breathing had returned to its gentle rhythm. Maya Thompson remained seated beside the hospital bed, her scrubs wrinkled from the long hours, still cradling the small child against her chest. Adam sat across from her, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion, his eyes red-rimmed from the tears he'd fought to contain. "I've never been that afraid before," Adam whispered, breaking the silence between them. "Not even when Sarah died." With her, There was time to prepare, to say goodbye. But with Sophie, his voice cracked. I thought I was going to lose her too. Maya gently stroked Sophie's hair, careful not to disturb the sleeping child. She's stronger than she looks, she said softly. Adam leaned forward, his gaze intent. About the dress, he began, the words coming hesitantly. I didn't give it to you to relive the past, or because I wanted you to be her. I gave it to you because I wanted you to have something beautiful. Because you deserve beautiful things. The nurse felt her chest tighten, remembering the whispers at the gala, the feeling of being a placeholder for a ghost. I saw your face that night, he continued. I know what people said. But Maya, he reached across the bed and took her hand, his touch warm and steady. You're not a replacement. You're the first person who truly sees us, both of us, and stays anyway, even when it's hard, even when it's messy. Tears welled in Maya's eyes, but these were different from the tears of fear she'd shed during Sophie's seizure. These were tears of relief, of being recognized for who she truly was. I've been running, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Not just from you, but from everything that matters. I was so afraid of being someone's second choice, of filling a space someone else left behind. Adam squeezed her hand. You're not filling a space. You're creating your own. Sophie stirred between them, murmuring softly in her sleep. The child's fingers curled around Maya's scrub top, holding on even in slumber. I think she agrees, Adam said with a gentle smile. Maya looked down at the little girl, then back at Adam. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like a shadow passing through their lives. She felt substantial, present, chosen not for who she resembled, but for who she was. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. The hospital waiting room was bathed in the soft glow of nightlights, creating islands of shadow where Maya Thompson and Adam sat side by side. Their shoulders nearly touched, both still trembling from Sophie's recent seizure. The crisis had passed, but something in Maya had broken open. There's something I've never told anyone here, Maya whispered, her fingers twisting together in her lap. My sister had a little boy, just a bit older than Sophie. Adam turned to face her, his expression open and patient. I was watching him that day, she continued, her voice catching. Just for an hour while she ran errands. He fell, nothing serious, just a small cut on his forehead. But I panicked and called her. Maya closed her eyes, the memory still razor-sharp after all these years. She was driving too fast to get home. A truck didn't see her at the intersection. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. She died instantly. My nephew survived, but he lives with my aunt now. I wasn't strong enough. Adam reached for her hand, but she pulled away. That's why I became a nurse, why I work 3 jobs, why I sing to Sophie when she seizes. The words tumbled out faster now. And why I pulled away after the gala. I'm terrified that my caring for people somehow hurts them, that I'm cursed. Maya, Adam said softly, using just her first name in a way that felt intimate. Everyone I've ever loved has suffered, she insisted. My sister died because I called her. My parents couldn't look at me afterward. My nephew lost his mother. Adam didn't rush to contradict her. Instead, he simply said, we can't choose how stories from our past end, but we can choose how the next chapters begin. Outside, the faint pop of early New Year's fireworks punctuated the silence, a premature celebration somewhere in the city. Sophie needs you, he said. I need you. Not because you're perfect or because you're replacing anyone, because you're you. This time when he reached for her hand, Maya didn't pull away. His palm was warm against hers, solid and real. I'm so afraid, she admitted. I know, he nodded. So am I. As more fireworks illuminated the night sky outside the window, Maya leaned her head against Adam's shoulder. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to be held, to be comforted rather than being the comforter. The weight of her guilt didn't disappear, but somehow sharing it made it lighter. In that quiet moment, Maya chose hope over fear, possibility over the past. The corner of Reyes & Co. had undergone a transformation that felt like magic. What was once storage space for excess inventory now glowed with soft yellow walls and twinkling fairy lights. Maya Thompson stood in the doorway, taking in the plush reading nooks, child-sized bookshelves, and a hand-painted sign that read, "The Sunshine Room," in cheerful letters. "Do you think they'll like it?" she asked, smoothing her hands over her jeans. Adam smiled, adjusting a stuffed elephant on one of the small chairs. "It's perfect," he said, his voice quiet but certain. The bookstore owner had invested not just money but heart into this space, a sanctuary where children recovering from hospital stays could find comfort in stories and soft places to land. Maya walked the perimeter, straightening books and fluffing pillows. Each detail had been carefully considered: hypoallergenic materials, gentle lighting that wouldn't trigger seizures, books featuring characters with medical conditions. A small medical kit sat discreetly in a cabinet just in case. "The hospital coordinator called," Adam said. "They're bringing the first group tomorrow." Maya nodded, her throat tight with emotion. This room represented something neither of them had expected to find: purpose born from pain, connection forged in quiet moments of care. The bell above the bookstore door jingled, and Sophie entered, holding her grandmother's hand. The little girl's eyes widened as she took in the colorful space. She had been discharged 3 weeks ago, but still visited the hospital for regular checkups. "What do you think, sweetheart?" Adam knelt to his daughter's level, watching as she explored with cautious curiosity. Sophie moved slowly toward the reading corner, where a basket of plush suns in various sizes sat beside a rocking chair. She picked up the smallest one, hugging it to her chest. "Sunshine," she whispered. The word hung in the air like a miracle. Maya froze, her eyes meeting Adam's across the room. It was the first word Sophie had spoken since her mother's death. "Yes, Sunshine," the nurse said gently, kneeling beside her. "Would you like me to read you a story?" Sophie nodded, climbing into Maya's lap as naturally as breathing. Adam watched them settle into the rocking chair, his daughter's small hand patting the book cover as Maya began to read. In that moment, he understood that healing wasn't the dramatic finale he'd been waiting for. No thunderclap of sudden wellness, no movie-perfect moment of complete recovery. It was this: his daughter speaking one word, Maya's gentle voice reading a story, and his own heart finally quiet enough to hear them both. The Sunshine Room wasn't just for the children who would come. It was for all three of them, a space where new beginnings could take root and grow, one page at a time. The soft glow of candlelight danced across the wooden tables of the small bistro tucked away on a quiet street corner. Maya Thompson sat across from Adam Reyes, both of them dressed casually. She in a simple pale blue sweater that brought out the warmth in her eyes. He in a relaxed button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Between them, a shared plate of appetizers and 2 glasses of wine created an intimate tableau. "I think this is the first time we've been somewhere without beeping monitors," Maya said with a gentle smile, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her glass. Adam nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "And the first time I've seen you not rushing between 3 jobs." He reached across the table, his hand hovering momentarily before covering hers. The gesture was tentative yet certain, like everything between them had been. Their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences that neither felt compelled to fill. They spoke of Sophie's progress at her new preschool, how she'd begun stringing together short sentences, and the way her eyes lit up whenever they visited the Sunshine Room at the bookstore. "She asked for you this morning," the father said, his voice soft with gratitude. "She wanted to know if Maya Sunshine was coming for dinner too." The nurse laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. "I've been upgraded from just Sunshine to Maya Sunshine? I'm honored." As they shared dessert, 1 plate, 2 forks, Maya realized something profound. This wasn't a continuation of anything that came before, not a replacement or substitution. This was entirely new, built on the foundation of who they were now, not who they had been or lost. "Thank you," Adam said suddenly, "for seeing us when we were invisible." Maya squeezed his hand. "Thank you for noticing when I was trying not to be seen." Neither spoke of tomorrow or made sweeping declarations. They didn't need to. The quiet certainty between them spoke volumes. A shared understanding that healing wasn't a destination, but a journey they were choosing to walk together. Outside, the evening had turned cool, and Adam draped his jacket over Maya's shoulders as they walked slowly toward her apartment. Their hands found each other naturally, fingers intertwining without hesitation. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. One built on shared grief transformed into compassion, on kindness offered without expectation, and on the courage to begin again after believing that some doors had closed forever.